Hello and welcome to Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast. Our guest today is someone who has said she bleeds green. She was educated in Dublin City schools, grew her business here, and raised her family.
And she has certainly turned love into public service, and we here in Dublin are the beneficiaries. Mayor Chris Amorose Groomes, welcome to Link Ahead.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so excited to have you. This is your second term as mayor, as you were recently reelected by your peers on council to another 2-year term in this role. What are your major goals this time around?
Well, council has several working initiatives that are working their way through the process right now. First of all, would be the Fiber to the Home initiative, which I think our residents will grow to appreciate more and more as it comes online and they get to benefit from what is actually happening. The next would likely be implementing the Envision Dublin and our update to our community plan, and certainly an update to the Parks and Rec master plan. I think that's what citizens will feel the most in the community. And then I would say Metro Center update. That's going to be a big one for council, certainly to help drive our revenues into the future. And then certainly transportation initiatives that would come online.
We're going to talk a lot about most of those here coming up a little bit more.
Absolutely. Now, you often talk about Dublin being having a sense of place, that we sweat the details of a growth, infrastructure, residential input. How will this idea guide your second term?
This guides everything that Dublin is. Regardless of who's in the seat, regardless of what is going on, this is who we are at our foundation. The City of Dublin is profoundly committed to the look, the feel, and the function of the public space.
You are a soundbite machine because I love that. And recently you used a phrase saying that Dublin is positioned for a prosperous future. And can you elaborate a little bit more on that idea for our listeners?
Sure. I think one of Dublin's most important ideologies is to keep our eye on the ball. The eye on the ball is the finances. The funding of this community is what drives all of the wonderful things that we get to do. And if we lose sight of that, we won't have to worry about doing other things because we won't have the capability to do so. What do we do to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball? I think we do a number of things. One is that we are a business-friendly community. We've worked really hard to keep our income tax at 2% when many of our peers have gone to 2.25% and 2.5%. So it is advantageous to do business in the City of Dublin. The other is the significant investment over a long period of time into doubling fiber and having our commercial businesses have access to that 10 gigabyte backbone or 100 gigabyte backbone. Transportation is something that is really important. We've done a number of things in the City of Dublin to make sure that transportation initiatives make it easy for our residents to get around the city, whether it be on a bicycle, on a scooter, in a car, on your foot, through our walking path system. Transportation is really important. We also try to be great partners with our educational system because we need the businesses that call this community home need a great workforce. And the easiest way to grow workforce here locally is to educate our own. So we work very closely with the Dublin City Schools to make sure that the kids that graduate from there have the skills and the potential to work for our those that participate here in our local economy. And then lastly, I think it's quality of life. You know, we do great events. Dublin does so many things really well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's back up a bit and talk about your various leadership roles. Your first term as mayor started in 2020. And what happened in 2020? Worldwide pandemic.
It wasn't her fault, Bruce.
No, I'm not. At no point is there any blame to be placed. But you kind of got the shaft a little bit. So what lessons did you learn from COVID as a leader? And what lessons did the city learn?
Well, first of all, if there's another pandemic, I will make sure that I never sit in that seat again. A global pandemic. So I think probably the most profound thing that I learned from that time is to learn how to listen. And by that I mean, I'll give you a brief example. So on a one day, it was in the colder months of the year in 2020. I received 2 messages. The first message was from an elderly woman who was the primary caregiver of her elderly husband. And she had sent me a note and said, "Hey, could you please make it so that the mail only gets delivered once a week? Because I've been reading about the virus and it has, 36, 48-hour lifespan. I can never get my mail because I can't bring it into the home and expose my husband to whatever COVID virus residue might be on the mail.
Wow.
And the second one I got was from a guy who had some significant health issues, and it was really important that he exercise daily.
Mhm.
And he wanted the rec center to be open all day, every day to anybody because he needed to get exercise due to his condition, his medical conditions. And so I think what I learned there is that they were two very opposite perspectives about the same issue.
Mhm.
They were both incredibly real to the individuals that was presenting them, and the solutions were difficult. And I think one of the things is I learned how to listen to people and really understand that two people can be looking at the same thing and see something very different. So for the woman, the elderly woman, I sent her a link to the USPS to have her mail held
Right.
because I said, I would call the same 1-800 line to the
Right.
post office that you would. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody there. But they had a link and you could hold your mail and then you could have it delivered. And then to the guy that wanted to have the rec center open, I sent him the map of the paths that we plow in the city. So at the event that it was winter weather, that he could still get on these paths and
Mhm.
still have an opportunity for exercise. But I think that's one of the biggest things I learned out of COVID is really just how to listen.
Well, you did such a great job during that. And I think you were kind of poised for leadership. You were the vice mayor before that. And before that, you served 8 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission, 6 as chair. A similar question, those experiences brought you what type of perspective?
I think you really start to understand how this $120 million a year organization, how it works. And it takes a long time to learn those things. And I think as through my time on the Planning Commission, I really understood the importance of the built environment, of what it felt like to be in Dublin and what it felt like to be in other places and why were they different and what were the details. And so I think it's been that's a long progression because then you start to understand revenue and you start to understand that we are in excess of 95% funded through income tax. And so you understand what it is, what the only thing you have to generate revenue is real estate and how you leverage that land to garner the dollars that it takes to take care of your people. And once you see those come in with drawings, right, and go back and forth in the planning commission, then maybe it goes to city council for an economic development agreement or something. And then it goes into the construction phase. And then ultimately, you'll see the success of whatever organization occupies that facility.
That's Dublin right there. You've talked about it from the start. We listen to what people want, and then we put it through a process, and it's democracy at its finest here in Dublin. Something we've talked a lot about on episodes is regional cooperation. Yes, we're in competition with other municipalities, but overall, we have to have broad partnerships for the region to prosper. And we have many partnerships and agreements with our neighboring cities, including economic development agreement with the city of Columbus, involving about 5,000 acres on the west side of Dublin. Now, this involves a recent updated water and sewer agreement. So can you tell us more about its significance?
So this is one of those things that you probably won't hear anyone speak of for quite some time, but it's a really big deal. The fact that we were able to work these water and sewer agreements out with the city of Columbus is really speaks highly to the regional collaboration. So at 5,500 acres, it's 640 acre per square mile. It adds about 8.6 square miles to the city of Dublin. Given that we are 25 square miles, what that does is that increases our growth opportunity about 34%. Now, in particularly when we see these inflationary time periods and things like that, our revenues are relatively fixed in that it's a payroll tax on the people that work in the city of Dublin. And
Right.
yes, there is growth in that. But if we want to have significant growth over a long period of time, we need land to grow for the reasons that I described earlier. And so to be able to have a 34% expansion in your municipality is really significant. Dublin was about 95% built out
Mhm.
prior to this agreement being signed. And now this gives us 35% to grow. And I think for my children and my children's children, that's going to be the space that is going to generate the new revenues and provide the additional housing for generations to come.
It is a really great opportunity when you look around at some other communities that are landlocked.
Right.
That we have that opportunity is really important. So let's dive a little bit deeper into regional cooperation and development because you are chair of Mid Ohio Regional Planning Commission, also known as MORPC. Bruce worked there before he came to Dublin.
Right
A
here.
little
Yeah.
known fact. Tell our listeners about that organization and its importance to their lives.
When we talk about collaboration and we talk about working with our neighbors, that's where you go, and that's one of the places you get to go to meet them because it is a 15 county region
Right.
that Morpsey represents. And most every community that we would bump into on any level of economic development or things like that are present at the table. For instance, Kristen Atha, who is the director of public works at the city of Columbus, sits on my executive committee at Morpsey. And, she was the one we were working with the water and sewer agreement to have happen out on our western border. So, Morpsey's core responsibility is transportation. It's planning, it's process, and how it ultimately will be funded. It also works in sustainability spaces and housing. They are the air quality authority for us regionally. Um, and they are a convener to allow the region to speak with one voice so that when we go to the state or when we go to the federal government, we have the opportunity to sing from the same hymnal, if you will.
Absolutely. So, Chris, how does Morpsey shape issues like regional transportation?
Well, one of the largest spaces they work in, so they are the metropolitan planning organization for this 15 county region, which also resides within that district some of the rural planning organizations. So it is important that you have a metropolitan planning organization if you're going after federal dollars or any US DOT money or anything like that. So they are the body that has the capability to speak to those entities on our behalf.
So, on the topic of transportation, and we know you've been heavily involved in this effort, an exciting announcement was made at the end of last year on a proposed new Amtrak route. Right now, there's $500,000 allotted to study this, but it's getting some buzz because there's also talk of these routes eventually being bigger connects to cities like Chicago and New York. And we are poised for a station right here in Dublin. Is that right?
Well, so there were 4 FRA grants that were issued in the state of Ohio. One of them is surrounding Cleveland and access up to Grand Rapids um, and to Detroit. So that is one of the rail lines that was granted FRA dollars. The second one is the 3C&D corridor. So it's the Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati, not to be confused with my middle school report card. Um,
Nobody believes that.
oh, friends, get the record.
Oh.
The next one is daily service through Cincinnati. So that's the third one. And then the fourth one was what's called Midwest Connect. Midwest Connect comes from Chicago through Lima, through Columbus, and then on to Pittsburgh. So from Chicago, obviously, you can get to the West Coast and points beyond. And through Pittsburgh, you can get to up and down the eastern seaboard as well. So along that CSX rail line, the city of Dublin purchased land adjacent to it. And we are going to be in a competitive process to land a rail station there. We are opposed extremely well to do so. We have all of the tools that we need to make it happen. And we have been in the conversation for a long time. So this started really back in 2017. I was fairly new on council, and at Morpsey, they were talking about Hyperloop and what was going to happen with this tube thing. I'm think of yourself at the bank, right? And you put the tube in and it goes to points beyond. So Morpsey, so at that point in time, Dana, our city manager at that time, Sue Burness and Doug McCullough, we went to Nevada and we went to the test track for Hyperloop, and we met with the Virgin Hyperloop people and their team. There was a contingency from Morpsey that went along as well, and we were going to do an environmental impact study. Now, the good thing for Dublin is that route came along that CSX rail line that's on our western border. And so this Morpsey invested heavily, and the city invested also in what that what the environmental impact study would reveal. So that was the first time that we really considered another form of transportation in the city of Dublin.
Right.
So fast forward to 2019, through the support of all of council, and after investment in this study, unfortunately things with Hyperloop I don't know if that technology will ever happen.
Right.
They are building in some areas of the world. I don't know that we'll ever see that. But that environmental impact study that we participated in, once we got the call, so on December the 5th, it was at lunchtime, I got a phone call from one of our congressional offices that said, you've been identified as one of these recipients. And they were calling me in my Morpsey hat at the
Right.
time.
Right.
And we were over the moon. It was an absolute wonderful designation. Come to find out that there were 4 in the state of Ohio, which makes it even better because you want the entire state to be serviced,
Sure.
because you want to be able to move around. So
Mhm.
we were so enthused by that. So that was on December the 5th. And since then, over the course of the last 2 years, I've probably been to DC 4 or 5 times to appeal to our federal agencies. I'll bet I've had 25 meetings with the FRA, with the Amtrak folks, and with CSX folks. And so just trying to make sure that we remain at the center of that conversation and position us well, all while listening to say, hey, we've got this land. We have, I can't remember the frontage, but it's in excess of 3,000 feet of frontage on the rail track, which is really important because you need space for trains to stop.
Sure.
And ultimately, you might have to put in somewhere where it could pull off. It just gives us a lot of flexibility and we have a lot of options.
Now, we've spent some time here looking back and looking forward through your years as a resident, business owner, and public servant. How has Dublin grown in ways that you expected and maybe ways you didn't expect?
Well, golly. So I relate to stories, and when people tell me a story, I understand more of what they're talking about. So when I was a kid, I grew up just off of Bright Road and did a little development off Macbeth and Macduff. And so if you don't know where Bright Road is, it's north of 270, and it's a street that connects Sawmill Road, and it used to connect to Riverside Drive. Now it's cul-de-sac, and you have to come down through Emerald
Mhm.
Parkway to get there. But when I was a kid, it was on both ends. Well, on Saturday mornings, we used to ride our bikes up to Tuller Fruit Farm. We would ride up, we would go east on Bright Road, and then we would head south on Sawmill Road. And we would ride all the way down to Tuller Fruit Farm. Well, today, Tuller Fruit Farm is Home Depot.
I love these stories.
So if you
Oh.
can imagine an 10-year-old kid
Right.
riding their bike up Bright Road all the way. Now, at this point in time, Sawmill Road was just a 2-lane road, 1 lane in each direction with open ditches.
Right.
And so we would ride all the way down to where the Home Depot is now.
Yeah.
And you would see maybe a dozen cars
Really?
in the entirety of the trip. So when you ask me if Dublin's grown in ways that I expect or that I didn't expect, I think if I were to let my child ride their bike down Sawmill Road today, at the age of 8 or 10 years old, I would have a knock
Right.
on the front door, and they would be like, "Excuse me, Miss Amorose Groomes, I don't think you're fit for parenthood,
Oh.
and we're going to take it from here." So certainly, there's ways that I never dreamed
Right.
Dublin would grow.
Right. Yeah.
But I will tell you this. The village that we used to call home versus the city that it is today is really the work product of a long line of people that were very passionate,
Right.
that were very articulate, that were willing to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work of development. Never in my wildest dreams. So I sit on a committee for the National League of Cities called the Information Technology and Communications Committee. And never in my wildest dreams that 8, 10-year-old kid riding their bike to Tuller Fruit Farm for an apple fritter thought that they could possibly ever be at an ITC committee meeting and they would be talking about what's going on in Dublin, Ohio.
Wow.
Well, since you're talking about these visionaries who helped build this city, it's a great time for us to talk about your family. And we've had your sister, Jenny, on Link Ahead. She's the Chief Operating Officer for the Dublin Chamber of Commerce. Your mother, Marjorie Amorose, founded the Dublin Chamber and was part of the commission that wrote the original charter for the city. And your dad, David Amorose, was a Dublin vice mayor and served on our planning and zoning commission before that. So is it an understatement to say that public service is a way of life for the Amoroses?
I don't know if I would call it public service. I would call it a passion for your neighbors. My mom started the chamber out of our kitchen when I was, I don't know, I was probably 5 or 6 maybe, but we certainly are a matriarchal family. And my mom loves people like nobody I've ever known. And that her gift is that when she loves you, she believes that you can do things. And once you understand how much she believes in you, it becomes a whole lot easier to make things happen. And I would say that in our business community, there's more than 4,300 businesses that call the city
Right.
of Dublin home. And I would tell you that she was the first person to do economic development in the city of Dublin because she would talk with the early on folks at Wendy's and at OCLC and at Ashland Chemical, Dave D'Antoni at Ashland Chemical. All of these people were friends. And people were attracted to her because she knew how much that she loved them and believed in them. And so that, I think, set Dublin on to a great start of I'd never heard the term economic development. I'm sure she never heard the term economic development. My mom grew up in Linden, and they got married when my dad was a junior in college. She worked, put him through college, and didn't have that opportunity herself. So to say that she was doing economic development certainly would be a stretch, but she really was the first person that believed that the business community was important in the city of Dublin. So, it's really a lot of fun to be able to tell those stories and to be able to have watched it happen. And it gives you a lot of internal fortitude to know that there's great things ahead and to go ahead and pursue them.
Now, I have to ask you and Jenny, 2 successful sisters, any sibling rivalry there? Or are you 2 like your biggest cheerleaders for each other?
Well, if you've ever met my sister, you know that we are diabolically different people. So I would say, she was a cheerleader and I was a sports junkie. She
Right.
had a moped, I had a motorcycle. She's got 2 girls, I've got 2 boys.
That's
I don't
funny.
know where you want to start and end with that, but it's really a lot of fun because we are very different people. What we have in common professionally is our love for the community.
Right.
And it's expressed in very different ways. But at the end of the day, she's the only sister that I've got, and she is my biggest cheerleader, and I certainly am hers. But we go about things very differently.
Well, you talked about love for the community. You talked about passion for helping your neighbors. And that really sets up this next question pretty well. You were recently on the radio program All Sides with Anna Staver talking about the importance of home rule. And I know this is something you're passionate about. And that really is what it comes down to. It's about helping your neighbors and helping your community. So tell us broadly why this is such an important topic and then maybe some specific examples about what's at stake.
I am a real believer that the best government is one that's closest to the people.
Mhm.
And the folks in the city of Dublin, it is really easy to cast a vote and to understand the issues, to know what's on the ballot, and to have that level of education, to be a highly educated voter. And when we have local issues like this, our people get to speak with a very loud voice, differently than at the state and federal level.
Right. Absolutely.
And so, because we are a charter city, we have the ability of home rule. And home rule is the entity or the tool that's used so that cities can self-govern in certain aspects. And it's a fairly narrow column. Obviously, health, safety, some of those things are different. But when we talk about tobacco, when we talk about broadband and fiber, when we talk about short-term rentals, when we talk about plastic bags and guns, these are things that can be very local issues. And we should have the ability to make those decisions for ourselves. For short-term rentals, right? There are some communities where short-term rentals really would not ever be noticed.
Right.
Mhm.
Right? If you were in a very urban area, if there's
Right.
lots of traffic in
Yep.
and out. Now, or if you were in a very rural area, right? And nobody's coming in and out. Um, Now you counterpoint that with the end of a cul-de-sac in the city of Dublin,
Mhm.
when you have small children that are everywhere that are playing, they might play wiffle ball in the end
Right.
of the cul-de-sac,
Right.
Right.
right? So that is one example why home rule and why local control is so important. I mentioned before that I have two boys, so we watched a lot of Star Wars in our house. And if you've
Mhm.
ever watched Princess Amidala in Revenge of the Sith,
These guys are nodding over here. Yeah, you guys know what
You're
you're talking
speaking our
about.
language.
she says something in that movie that stopped me in my tracks the first time I heard it, and she says, "This is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause."
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you know these are our liberties. This is what's entitled to us by this Constitution of the state of Ohio. And so we need to defend them, and they're worth defending.
Right. Wow. I mean, I am so inspired after
Me
this
too.
podcast. Uh, so Mayor, we're kind of running out of some time here. So we wrap up every episode with rapid fire questions. So we're going to jump right into it. Now, the first question may or may not be rapid fire per se, but sports has been a big part of your life and your family. You have a son playing on the Ohio State golf team, and you were a competitive athlete too. So what did playing sports teach you about leadership?
It's funny you should ask that. Coach Charlie Spear was my high school basketball coach, and I think he was the first text I received after I became mayor.
Really?
And he said, "So proud of you."
That's
Aw.
awesome.
I still love my high school coaches. I see Dave Nosker, Fred Seeley, all of these guys around town, and they still have really soft places in my heart. But I think what high school sports, or what sports in general, teaches you, they teach you about teamwork. They teach you about preparation. They teach you to expect the unexpected, how to win, more importantly, how to lose,
Yeah.
and the importance of surrounding yourself with truth tellers, because that's the only way that you're going to improve on whatever field of play that you want, or if it's in the band, or if it's
Right.
on the theater, wherever it is. The importance of surrounding yourself with people that love you enough to tell you the truth.
Well, and I know
Absolutely.
City Council has a very competitive dodgeball team every year. And so I'm curious what kind of truth is told out there on the court.
So that's not a good example, because each year I think we have taken pictures of ourselves with the trophy that we never won.
That is
But-
funny.
But it
Oh
just
my.
makes for fun. So we do
Alright.
take a picture with the trophy before the game even starts.
I
That's
love
funny.
it. Okay, what's your favorite sport to watch in person?
I have two of them. Amateur golf,
Okay.
obviously, I
Right.
watch my son, and basketball.
How about to watch on TV?
March Madness, and my younger son is a soccer player, World Cup soccer.
Yeah.
Love it.
What's the number one question you get asked from residents?
Well, it usually starts something like this. "Hey, can you tell me what's going on?"
Yeah.
Fill in the blank.
Yep. Yep.
That's the number one question I get.
Mhm.
That's funny. Let's say you meet someone and they say, and this has probably never happened. Let's say you meet someone that says, "I know nothing about Dublin, Ohio. Never been there. Give me your elevator speech. What is it?"
I would say first that it is a first ring suburb of the city of Columbus. Second, that it's home to about 50,000 folks that are a very diverse yet very united group of people. I would say that it's the 12th largest economy in the state of Ohio. I would say that it's home to fantastic schools, that it hosts amazing events in the Memorial Tournament, the Irish Festival, and certainly the 4th of July. Mostly people that are working hard for the good of their family and for their neighbor alike.
Aw, I would say I
Alright.
want to live there.
Yeah. Sign me up.
We mentioned earlier you were on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 8 years. What's your favorite project that you helped shape?
It's hard to pick one. I would say the OU campus. I think that this community's only begun to see what that's going to be at some point in time. Um, I would say the Dublin Methodist Hospital auxiliary buildings and that entire campus over there. Certainly Avondale, a place that many of our seniors call home. The West Innovation District Code. I think that has laid the groundwork for some great development that we'll see in the coming years there. And certainly the relocation of Riverside Drive to create Riverside Crossing Park.
Now, you are a horticulturalist by trade. So we have to ask, what's your favorite Dublin park?
My favorite Dublin park is the first one. It's Scioto Park, and with Leather Lips there. Leather Lips was built in 1990 in that park. And there's something about, we used to go fishing down there when we were a kid. My dad would still tell stories when he was a kid. That was where the swimming pool was. So there's a spring that comes out of the hill there. and they used to fill a swimming pool with the spring water that would then overflow into the river. So I think it just has a deep history, and the Leather Lips Monument there is moving to me. Every time I come up that hill, it's moving.
Oh.
So impressive. And I didn't know that Scioto Park was the first park.
I
So
did not.
taught me that. Okay, 2 foodie questions. Number 1, favorite lunch or dinner spot?
Probably my favorite dinner spot is the Avenue Happy Hour. I just think it's a lot of fun.
It's good. How about a restaurant that flies under the radar that locals go to?
My favorite lunch spot is Harvest Pizza.
Yeah,
They've got the
That's good.
greatest lunch
That's good.
special with
Yes,
pizza and a
the
salad.
salad
I
and
mean,
the pizza.
oh,
Mhm.
golly, it's just really good.
If you're totally free of responsibilities and you have a whole Saturday, day and evening, what do you do with it?
So I'm an early bird. So I like to get up early. There's a 5 mile loop around the house where I live. It's a walking path. So I most every morning try to get on that 5 mile loop. But on a Saturday, if I finished that, I would come home and maybe mow the lawn or do something in the yard or in the garden, which I adore doing. If it's a nice day, I'd probably go over and walk 18 holes maybe with a friend. And I just, something about being in the quietness of a golf course with people that you so look forward to time with, and be able to be dedicated just there with a small group of people and have that time together for that length of time is something really special. And then I would come home, and we have a pizza oven and outside at the house, and I probably would end my day with some pizza in the pizza oven and maybe a glass of wine.
Wow. You have thought this out.
She's got it figured out.
I don't get very many of them, so I kind of treasure the thought.
You know what we didn't hear her say?
What's that?
Pickleball.
Pickleball.
We don't like to go an episode without talking about pickleball.
And that's our plug for pickleball.
Yeah.
Mayor Chris Amorose Groomes, thank you for joining us on Link Ahead. But more importantly, thank you for your steadfast and passionate service to the city of Dublin and to Central Ohio.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor to be with you.
It's been a great conversation. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to connect with your city. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many personalities and experiences that make Dublin a thriving place to live, work, and grow.